Welcome back, folks, to another episode of Brisket Medic, and we're excited that you're here today. Today we're going to be cooking another brisket over on the old country pecos. We're going to start off, this is another one of those cheap briskets. Guys, when I find briskets on sale, I really search through everything that they've got, and I find something that I really like and load up on them. This is another one that was on sale earlier this summer for $1.99 a pound, and of course I had to jump on it. We're going to do a real simple trim up on this. We're going to lay this out and we're going to take a look at the overall shape, the fat content, the fat, the silver skin, and make this thing aerodynamic but also evenly sized across it so it cooks evenly on the flat and the point. I start off by taking it out from the fat side in case I gouge it with my knife. It's okay gouging some of that fat because we're going to be cutting that off anyways. We lay it down on the board and we start to trim. And first thing I take off is the hard fat, that decal. Now I don't want to chase it too far, but being that I'm just cooking this for the family, a backyard cook, much like I would for a catering gig, I'm going to chase it a little further than I would in a competition trim. I'm going to take it down, but not too far, guys. You don't want to start separating the flat and the point. That's just not my preference. I think it dries out too easily, and I think there's also too much salt and rub that can get down in those pockets and give you kind of an unsavory bite, or too savory of a bite, just really not palatable. After we get all that hard fat off, we want to make sure that there's no loose pieces and go ahead and check and make sure how thick or thin our flat is. Take our knife around, get some of that top layer off. We're not going to really worry about a ton of silver skin on this one, but we are going to get that top layer of fat off because we want to really make sure that our rub, we're using Sucklebuster's espresso barbecue rub today, we want to make sure that that really penetrates down into the brisket. And I've got something that I'm going to be finishing this off with, a little secret tip, so make sure you stick around to the end for that. Once we've got our fat and everything off of the flat side, the lean side, we want to make sure that we shape it. I like to take and cut off. This particular brisket doesn't have a lot of thin meat on the flat. It was a really good proportionally cut brisket, so all I really want to do is knock some hard corners off. From there we flip it over and we're going to trim off some of that fat from the other side, and you'll see that there's a little bit of decal coming through there as well on this side. We're going to go ahead and trim that off. On the point side, you can almost trim all of that fat off. It's really personal preference. I don't like to bite through a ton of fat on the point side because there's so much intermuscular marbling on that side that I think that it's too rich when there's a big old fat pocket on the outside. But I'll take off most of the fat on that side and make sure there's about 1/4 of an inch. You can go a little bit less or a little bit more depending on what's already there. This one doesn't have a ton on there, and I'm really happy with that. After we trim all that up, again, we're looking for looseness, and we want to make sure that it's even thickness across that brisket, so you don't have this great big old hump on your point and then flattens out for the flat. You really want an even thickness brisket so it'll cook evenly and retain your moisture that way. From there, we're not going to apply any kind of moisture to it. We're not going to put a slather on it or anything like that. I just pulled this out of the package. It's nice and moist on its own, and it's going to retain this just fine. I'm going to go ahead and rub this Sucklebuster's espresso barbecue rub, and not really rub it. We're going to shake it on there nice and heavy because it is a thick piece of meat. We're going to put it on there nice and heavy. We're going to go flat side, get it covered, make sure you don't forget the sides. And we'll flip it over and do the same thing on the point side or the fat side. We're going to let that sit, and we're going to let that moisture be drawn out from just the outside edges while we start building our fire. And on this fire, I'm doing it a little bit different than all the other fires that I've done in the past because I happen to have a good amount of wood on me at this time. And I'm going to stack in some of the larger misshapen pieces of firewood that I have, some with a lot of bark in it, because all I'm doing is building a good coal bed, stack it up. And I love to start my fires with oil-soaked paper towels. Usually when I'm wiping out my cast iron, seasoning things, I save those paper towels, stick them in a jar, and they're great fire starters. And you're not spending any extra money. You've already spent the money on them. May as well use them up, right? We're going to let that burn down. We're going to let that seasoning soak into the brisket, and then we're going to stick our brisket on there Once our coal bed is built, our temp is up 275 to 300 degrees inside the smoker. We're going to throw this brisket in there, point side, facing the firebox, fat side up. That's not only Texas style, but it's imperative that we do this because this smoker, the way that I've modified it, it cooks from the top down, and it also cooks with a lot of air movement. So we really want to use that fat as insulation to make sure that it doesn't dry out our brisket too much and get that flat too crispy. We're going to come back in 3 hours. We're not going to open this up. We're not going to do anything for 3 hours. Keep that temperature steady, 275, 300 degrees. Watch that coal bed. Coal beds are an integral part of making sure that you have good fire management, and it's just fun. I mean, part of the joy of cooking barbecue in an offset is the challenge of maintaining a fire, and I absolutely love it. Folks, we're 3 hours in. We've been maintaining a temperature between 275 and 300. I'm about to throw another log on, but before I do that, I want to open this up and check out this brisket for the first time since we put it on there. And when I do that, I'm going to be putting a meat thermometer in there so that I can manage this fire really, really well as we're starting to get into that really rendering down phase of this cook. We're really going to start cooking down that internal fat to where you get that beautiful yellow fat that's rendered down perfectly, that clean bite through, that tenderness and that juiciness that's going to be a result of your brisket. And I really want to make sure that I'm maintaining an amazing fire for the rest of this cook. This is actually the Meat Stick X. I'm going to be doing a review on this, so make sure you look for that very, very soon. This is a great little temperature probe thermometer. It's got an ambient thermometer on the end plus your meat probe. Pretty great, and I particularly like the bar graph and the cook tracking that it has on it. So let's go ahead and take a look at this brisket. Let's get this meat probe put in and see how we need to go from here. Oh yeah, she's looking really, really nice. Getting some great mahogany color. That fat is starting to turn yellow. That is absolutely what we want to see. And I'm going to be inserting the Meat Stick X meat probe inside this, and it's going to be great because this tip over here is going to measure this ambient temperature, and this got a little line right there. You got to go past that line, and I'm going to be measuring the temperature of the very center of our brisket and connect it to my phone so I can get a lot done today. Putting that in there, and it doesn't look like it needs to be spritzed. It's nice and moist all the way around our edges. It's not getting too dark around the edges, so I'm just going to leave it alone. I'm going to shut this down and keep on cooking. All right, folks, we're just over 4 hours in, and I think I'm going to go ahead and boat this brisket. Now, it's staying nice and dry. The color is really, really good, but I want to ensure that this really cheap brisket doesn't dry out on us too much. And so in doing so, I'm going to just put it in a foil boat, and that's going to allow that top to continue to render down that fat, and but also keep that the edges from cooking too much and pulling out any moisture from the flat side of the brisket. So we're going to go ahead and put it in a foil boat and let it ride out. It's almost done. This brisket was only about 9 pounds, so after the trim it was about 7.5 or so, and so it didn't take very long to cook at all, especially running right around 300 degrees. Let's go ahead and get it foil boated, and I'll bring you back when it's ready to pull. All right, folks, after 7 hours in, I started probing this thing, and it was like peanut butter, just real soft to push through with a little bit of substance, but no pullback when I removed the probe. And it tipped about 199 to 200 degrees on both the flat and the point. That's why it's so important that our trim gets that thickness evenly. Now, I told you I had a tip at the beginning of the video to finish this thing off and make it absolutely delicious, and I think you're gonna love this. Uncle Steve's Smoke Bomb. I'm going to be dusting the top of this brisket before I cover it up to let it rest, but also after I slice it before serving. It gives just a very nice earthy, sweet, and savory flavor. I'm not sure what's all in it, but it's absolutely delicious. It kind of reminds me of a smoky pecan mesquite flavor, and he absolutely nailed it with this. It makes for a great finishing dust. Uncle Steve's Smoke Bomb. So get this all covered up. We're going to let it rest in the oven for a couple of hours until it gets down to about 150 or so, and then we're going to chill it because we're actually going to be cutting this up and slicing it at the lake. Guys, obviously we're not at the lake. I did forget to film the slicing and serving of the brisket, but we had an amazing time. We were celebrating the 4th of July with friends and family, and it was awesome. Follow these tips. Remember that trick of sprinkling a little bit of finishing dust, finishing powder, finishing spices, seasonings on your brisket as it rests, and then also as it's sliced. You're gonna love it. I guarantee it. Even this $1.99 brisket was outstanding. Thanks, guys, for sticking around. If you haven't liked already, make sure you do that. It really helps us out. Comment down below your favorite rub for your briskets, and make sure you're subscribed if you're not already. Ring that bell. We love you guys. Drink more water.